You are washing your six-figure German supercar, the pride of your garage, the Audi R8. You are detailing the engine bay, wiping down that glorious V8 or V10, when your cloth catches on something. Not a bolt, not a weld, a hairline fracture in the aluminum space frame, the car's literal backbone. This isn't a scratch, it's a death sentence. The realization hits like a physical blow. This crack means the car is not just broken, it is structurally totaled. There is no fix. The irony is brutal. You bought into Vorsprung durch Technik, German engineering excellence, and the most fundamental part of the car, the thing that holds it all together, has failed. The dream is literally cracked in half. When the R8 launched in 2006, it was a revelation. Audi, the brand of all-wheel drive rally dominance and sleek sedans, was building a mid-engine supercar. And not just any supercar, an everyday one. It was supposed to be the sensible choice, the one you could drive to the grocery store, the one that brought Lamborghini Gallardo performance without the Italian drama. The heart of this revolution was the Audi Space Frame, called ASF. This aluminum chassis was a masterpiece of engineering, a complex web of extrusions and castings that was both incredibly light and phenomenally rigid. It was the technical party trick that justified the price tag. But behind the gleaming show cars and the glowing press reviews, there was a manufacturing reality. Audi had to build this complex aluminum space frame at a scale they had never attempted for a production car. To meet demand and control costs, compromises were made. The space frame was not just one piece, it was a puzzle of components welded and bonded together. And at certain critical stress points, specifically around the front suspension mounts and the B-pillar areas where the roof meets the sills, the design had a fatal flaw. The loads generated by the car's immense performance, even just on normal roads, were concentrating in ways the engineers apparently had not fully anticipated. The very thing that made the R8 so special, its lightweight aluminum skeleton, was also its Achilles heel. The pursuit of progress through technology had, in this case, led to a critical compromise in integrity. The process itself was part of the problem. Building an aluminum space frame is not like stamping out a steel unibody. It is more like aerospace construction. Each joint, each weld, is critical. And when you are ramping up production to satisfy a hungry market, quality control can slip. The story goes that the early cars, the ones that built the R8's legendary reputation, were almost hand-built with intense scrutiny. But, as the line sped up, the margin for error shrunk. It is the classic automotive story. The hero car that wins all the awards is a carefully prepped factory jewel, but the one you buy from the dealer is built on a Tuesday afternoon by a team trying to hit their quota. The seeds of the scandal were baked into the production process from the very beginning, hidden beneath the gorgeous aluminum bodywork that made the car so desirable. The first reports started trickling onto forums around 2008. At first, they were easy to dismiss. A post on R8Talk or Audizine would show a blurry photo of a crack near the front axle. The comments were predictable, blaming the owner. That's what happens when you track your car. You must have hit a huge pothole, user error. Audi's initial response followed that script perfectly. Isolated incident, owner abuse, not a manufacturing issue. But then another post appeared, and another, and a pattern began to emerge that was impossible to ignore. The cracks were not random. They appeared in the exact same locations, car after car after car. The most common failure point was the front suspension mount, a massive aluminum casting that bears the brunt of cornering forces. Owners reported a new creak or groan from the front end, and on inspection they found a hairline fracture snaking across the metal. The other hot spot was the B-pillar area, where the side sill meets the structure that holds the roof. This is a high-stress zone in any car, but in the R8, it was proving to be a critical weakness. These were not cars that had been crashed or abused on racetracks. These were well-maintained garage queens driven on public roads. Audi's strategy shifted from dismissal to obstruction. When an owner managed to get their car to a dealer, the process became a nightmare. The dealership had to document the crack, send photos to Audi corporate, and wait. The response was often a refusal of warranty coverage, citing modifications or off-road use, a ridiculous accusation for a low-slung supercar. If the owner pressed, Audi might offer a Goodwill repair, but the quote was astronomical, tens of thousands of dollars. The message was clear: go away. This created a chilling effect. Many owners, facing a repair bill that was a significant fraction of the car's value, simply sold the car as is to unsuspecting buyers or traded it in, passing the time bomb down the line. The community, however, was getting smarter. They started comparing VYN numbers and build dates. They identified specific production batches from 2007 to 2009 that seemed most susceptible. This was not a few isolated cases anymore. It was a pattern, and it pointed directly to a fundamental engineering problem that Audi was desperately trying to ignore. The evidence was cracking wide open. So Audi's playbook kicked into high gear, and it was a masterclass in corporate stonewalling. The strategy was simple: delay, deny, and make the problem so expensive and frustrating to deal with that the owner just gives up. When an owner, already in a state of panic, managed to get their cracked R8 to a dealership, they were not met with concern. They were met with a bureaucratic maze. The dealership, often sympathetic but with their hands tied by corporate, would have to submit a massive package of evidence to Audi AG in Germany, high-resolution photos, a full vehicle history, a statement from the owner. And then they would wait for weeks, sometimes months, for a response. That response was almost always a denial. The reasons were a rotating menu of excuses, signs of track use, aftermarket modifications. Even if the car was bone stock with perfect service records, they would find something. A slightly wider tire could be labeled a modification that voids the structural warranty. The goal was to establish doubt, to shift the blame from their engineering to the owner's driving habits. It was a gaslighting campaign on an industrial scale. Meanwhile, Audi was quietly acknowledging the issue internally. Technical service bulletins, TSB says, started circulating to dealerships. These documents did not admit a defect. They were framed as diagnostic procedures for unusual noises from the front end. They outlined exactly where to look for cracks, and they described the symptoms of the failing space frame. For the technicians, it was a clear admission. For the customers, it was a secret they were not allowed to see. If you did not know to ask for the specific TSB by number, you would never know it existed. Then came the financial knockout punch. If an owner managed to fight through the denial and Audi was forced to consider a repair, the quote was designed to be a deal breaker. We are not talking about a few $1,000s. We are talking about quotes of $80,000, $100,000, even $120,000. The repair was not a repair, it was a replacement. The entire aluminum space frame would need to be swapped out, a process so labor-intensive it was essentially rebuilding the car from the ground up. The labor alone was astronomical. Audi was presenting a bill that often exceeded the car's current market value. The message was unmistakable. We would rather you just scrap the car than admit we built it wrong. This is how Audi treated the very customers who had spent top dollar to buy into their Halo car, their brand flagship. When those customers needed Audi the most, the company's response was to hand them a financial guillotine and ask them to put their own head on the block. So you've got the quote, $100,000, maybe more. And that's when the real nightmare begins. Because this isn't a repair bill you can just put on a credit card. This is a financial guillotine. The moment that crack appears, your six-figure supercar instantly transforms into a liability worth less than zero. Think about that. You own an asset that now has negative value. The cost to make it whole again is more than the car is worth on the open market. You are, quite literally, trapped. Insurance is your first desperate call, and it goes exactly how you'd expect. You explain the situation, saying your car's frame is cracked. The insurance adjuster hears manufacturing defect, and that's the magic phrase that makes your policy vanish into thin air. Insurance covers accidents. It covers collisions. It does not cover a fundamental failure of the product you bought. They will send an adjuster out, they will look at the crack, and they will say the exact same thing Audi did, that this is not a result of a covered event, claim denied. So you're on your own. Completely. Now you're facing a choice with no good options. Option 1, pay Audi the $100,000 to essentially rebuild your car. You would be pouring money into a black hole. Even after the repair, the car's history is permanently tarnished. Its resale value is destroyed. Who is going to buy an R8 with a replaced chassis, no matter how official the repair is? You would be lucky to get 50 cents on the dollar. Option 2, try to sell the car as is. You become part of the problem. You list it online, you disclose the issue to a handful of serious buyers who lowball you into oblivion, or you do not disclose it and pass the time bomb to some other unsuspecting enthusiast. Option 3, part it out. You take a wrench to your dream car and sell it piece by piece. The engine, the transmission, the carbon fiber body panels, they are all worth good money. But the soul of the car, the chassis, goes to the scrapyard. It is a slow, painful autopsy that might recoup a fraction of your loss. The personal stories from this era are brutal. There is the doctor who bought his R8 as a reward for making partner, only to discover the crack during a routine service. He fought with Audi for a year, spent thousands on independent engineering reports, and eventually sold the car for a massive loss, the experience souring him on the brand forever. There is the young entrepreneur who stretched his finances to get into the supercar club, only to have his investment literally break in half, pushing him to the brink of bankruptcy. These were not irresponsible owners. They were Audi's target demographic, successful and passionate people who bought into the Vorsprung, Durchtechnik promise. And when that promise shattered, Audi left them holding the bag, facing a financial disaster that no one could have anticipated when they signed on the dotted line. The dream was not just cracked, it was bankrupt. For years, the story lived in the dark corners of the internet, on forum threads that were easy for Audi to ignore. But the internet has a way of connecting dots, and around 2010 to 2011, the pattern became undeniable. It was not just one or two people complaining anymore, it was a chorus. Enthusiasts on R8Talk, Audizine, and other forums started a digital investigation. They created shared spreadsheets cataloging vehicle identification numbers, build dates, mileage, and the exact location of the cracks. They cross-referenced the data and discovered something terrifyingly consistent. The problem was concentrated in early production cars, specifically those built between 2007 and 2009. This was no longer anecdotal, it was statistical. The community weaponized this data. They did not just complain, they presented evidence. When an owner posted about a cracked frame, others would immediately ask for the vehicle identification number and build date. They could then point to 3, 4, or 5 other cars from the same production batch with the exact same failure. This was evidence that Audi could not simply dismiss as owner abuse. You cannot blame a specific Tuesday afternoon at the factory in Neckarsulm on how someone drove their car in California. The problem was clearly rooted in the manufacturing process itself. This grassroots effort got a massive credibility boost when independent engineering firms started getting involved. Owners preparing for legal battles hired forensic engineers to examine their cars. These were not Audi fanatics. these were neutral third parties with no skin in the game. Their reports were damning. They pointed to specific design flaws, inadequate material thickness at high stress points, questionable welding techniques, and a fundamental miscalculation of the dynamic loads the chassis would experience. These reports gave the owners something they never had before: expert testimony. They could walk into a dealership or a courtroom with a document that said in professional terms, "Audi messed up." The tipping point came when these two forces, the organized community data and the independent engineering analysis, collided. An owner would go to Audi with a cracked chassis, and instead of accepting the denial, they came armed. They had a printout of the forum spreadsheet showing 10 other identical failures. They had the engineering report pinpointing the design flaw. They had photos from other owners showing the identical fracture pattern. The wall of denial began to crack. Audi's representatives could no longer stick to the isolated incident script when faced with overwhelming, coordinated evidence. The community had done the job that Audi's own quality control should have done. They had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a systemic failure. The company was cornered. The era of simply hoping the problem would go away was over. So Audi finally had to move. The pressure was too great. But their solution was a masterpiece of corporate half measures designed to look like action while solving absolutely nothing. They initiated a Goodwill repair program. Sounds generous, right? Wrong. It was a minefield of arbitrary criteria. Whether your car got fixed depended on a secret formula. Your service history had to be perfect, exclusively at Audi dealers. The car had to be completely stock down to the factory tire brand. Mileage had to be under a certain undisclosed threshold. And most crucially, you could not have made too much noise about the problem online. If you were the person who posted the damning forum thread, you were effectively blacklisted. It was a reward for silent suffering and a punishment for holding them accountable. Even if you jumped through every hoop and Audi agreed to the repair, what you got was not a fix. It was a swap. The process was apocalyptic. The entire car had to be disassembled. Body panels came off, the interior was removed. The entire drivetrain, including engine, transmission, and suspension, was removed. The cracked space frame was cut out, and a new one was not welded in. They used a special adhesive bonding process. So, your repaired R8 became a Frankenstein's car of glued-together aluminum, rebuilt by a technician who might have done the procedure once before. Labor time was measured in hundreds of hours. Audi was spending a fortune to avoid admitting a defect. The real kicker is this: the solution did not address the root cause. They were installing the exact same part number, the same design, with the same inherent flaw. It was like replacing a broken leg with an identical pre-broken leg. For owners, the nightmare was not over. Even after a traumatic months-long rebuild, the resale value of the car was permanently destroyed. A Carfax report showing a chassis replacement is the kiss of death. You were left with a car you could not trust and could not sell, a constant reminder of the brand's betrayal. The Goodwill program was not about making customers whole. It was about containing the scandal, one silenced owner at a time, without ever fixing the actual problem they had engineered into the car. This scandal is the ghost that haunts the first-gen R8's legacy. It is the unspoken asterisk next to every glowing review. For every story about the glorious V10 whale or the everyday usability, there is a whisper: check the front frame rails. It permanently altered the car's place in the market. While contemporaries like the Gallardo and the 997 Turbo have solidified their status as modern classics, the early R8 carries a stigma. Values are softer. Savvy buyers know to bring a flashlight and a mirror to a pre-purchase inspection, to crawl under the car and look for telltale cracks. The trust is gone. You will never ever see an official recall from Audi for this. A recall is an admission of a safety defect, and that opens a legal and financial floodgate they have spent millions to keep closed. Instead, The knowledge lives on as folklore in the enthusiast community, a required piece of due diligence you will not find in any glossy brochure. This is the ultimate lesson for any supercar buyer. The brand halo means nothing. You cannot buy on reputation alone. You have to dig into forums, know the failure points, and understand that even the most beautiful, celebrated machine can have a fatal flaw that its maker will deny to the bitter end. And this story is not unique to Audi. It is a pattern in the industry, seen in the Ford GT's early production frame issues, certain Porsche 911 generations with intermediate shaft bearing problems, and the McLaren F1's famous fuel tank fuse. The difference is in the response. Some companies eventually own it. Audi's response to deny, to obfuscate, to financially cripple its own customers is what elevates this from an engineering mistake to a full-blown scandal. It revealed a corporate mentality where protecting the brand's image was more important than the people who believed in it. The R8 was a machine that captured a generation's imagination, but its skeleton holds the ghost of corporate arrogance. The real scandal was never the cracked aluminum. Metal can fail, engineers make mistakes. The real scandal was the crack in Audi's character. It was the deliberate, calculated decision to abandon their customers, to gaslight them, and to force them into financial ruin rather than face a hard truth. This story matters because it is a blueprint for how corporations act when their prestige is on the line. They close ranks, they blame you, and they hope you are not smart enough to fight back. For every car enthusiast chasing a dream, this is your warning. Do your homework. Trust the community, not the marketing. And never forget that sometimes the most beautiful machines are hiding the ugliest secrets.